Thank you, Christine, and good morning, everybody. You've just received a good deal of information. I'm sure it's a bit confusing. I'm going to give you some more. What I want to do is to fit what's happening here into the larger picture of the global conversations that you've heard about earlier this morning and that are continuing. We heard this morning from our minister that there are 3 global conversations going on in the world today. One is that of economics. A second one is that of inequality. And the third is that of climate change. When we talk about cities, we are talking about the need to address those 3 conversations. And indeed, we know this is important because let me give you 3 pieces of data. First of all, today, urban populations are 54% of the world's populations, and we will probably go to more than 3/4 of the world's populations. But we need to remember, of this 54% of the population today, 1 billion people live in slums. This is not something that we want to continue in this urban growth. We heard today that 300 cities produce 50% of the world's GDP. Well, there are more than 4,000 cities of 100,000 or more. What's happened to those 3,700 other large cities in terms of their production and contributions to the world's GDP? And lastly, when we think about climate change, cities produced 80% of the greenhouse gases that are floating around the world today. We need to address that too, and we can through the immediate things that are going to be happening in the next few months and years. Now, in addition to the Habitat 3 conference, there are 3 other things that are happening. First of all, this July, there is a global conference called Financing for Development, trying to figure out how we'll pay for the development that we'll have in the future. Secondly, in September, there is the conference on the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, you have in your packet a nice little pamphlet, a little piece of paper, you might want to look at it, called Sustainable Development Goals, Target 11.7. Let me tell you, we had in the past year an enormous fight to convince the member states of the United Nations that cities were important. You may laugh, but it was no laughing matter. At any rate, the victory was won so far with regard to having this goal 11. And I want to point out that within the goal 11, there are seven targets. You're seeing the 7th here. There are 6 others. And as the mayors said this morning, it's important to think comprehensively and holistically about cities. Public space is, of course, essential to the sustainable city, the livable, the safe, and the wonderful city that we're all trying to create. But so is housing, so is transportation, so is thinking about environmental impact, so is planning, so is dealing with resilience. And these are the other targets that we have to keep in mind when we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals and the framework that will be passed this September. The 3rd conference that is occurring, of course, is in Paris, which is the Council of Partners Conference, which is the climate change part. And I'm sure you'll hear over the course of this meeting some of the instruments that are being put forward so that cities will have a role in dealing with climate change. And after all these things happen, the Financing for Development, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the COP21 conference, we will have the first international global conference, which is Habitat 3. And you have in your document one of the policy papers for Habitat 3. Now let me talk a little bit about that and what we're doing here with regard to participation in Habitat 3. Habitat 3 has sort of 3 components. One component is the knowledge component. How do we produce the knowledge to come out with an outcome document that hopefully will represent the global consensus of what needs to be done, that we, the citizens, can take back to our countries, to our mayors, and say, listen, this is what the world thinks should be done, why aren't you doing it? Or how can we do this together? And this is what this meeting is about. How can we create public space that is sustainable, create safe cities, resilient cities, prosperous cities together. So the knowledge component consists of the national reports. Many nations have put them in. You can see them on the website. The second part of this all is the policy component. Christine referred to the policy units. There are two contributions to the policy component. One is the policy papers, of which you have one in your packages here, the one on public space. There are 21 others that deal with 6 different areas that the new urban agenda will be dealing with. And those 6 areas are social cohesion, urban frameworks, the governance and financing that we were talking about before, spatial development, into which public space fits along with planning, the urban economy, urban ecology and environment, and urban housing and basic services. Of these 22 papers, 10 entities called policy units are to be created. The policy units will be created in the next month. They will consist of experts drawn from around the world, nominated by their countries, by their member states, and by other stakeholder groups, that will take the inputs that are coming in through this stream of knowledge, both from the national reports, the policy unit papers. The policy unit papers, by the way, were written by the UN agencies, so they represent the UN agency perspective on what the topic is. So when you read the policy paper on public space, which you have in your packet, you can comment on that, and you're meant to comment on that. So the inputs also will come from regional and thematic conferences that will be held in the next few months. And the inputs will come from us. The inputs will come from us through the city we need. The inputs will come from us through online contributions that we can make in the next few months. And that comes to the third part of what Habitat 3 is all about, and that is the engagement part. The engagement part is us. The engagement part is the organizations that are coming together to create logical, clearly stated, well-evidenced positions to bring to the attention of the member states that these are the needs we have for the new urban agenda. And that's what we're about today, is to create these logical, rational, well-supported from the point of view of scientific evidence and from local experience, those things that we know so well, that you've heard so beautifully this morning from the 2 mayors talking about their experiences and what's important in their cities. This is what we will bring forward through a systematic way. The systematic way from the point of view of citizen participation and civic engagement is this new platform that has been created last April called the General Assembly of Partners. This is a second special initiative of the World Urban Campaign, and it will be meeting several times before the creation of the Zero Draft for the new urban agenda. It will aim to bring together what before was a cacophony of voices towards what might be sustainable urbanization. It will bring together, we hope, with your cooperation, your participation, a good, solid view of what we believe is the city we need for the future. So thank you.